As their daughter was dying, she caught her husband cheating, dumping him. But what happened at the end? Hi, my beautiful story family. Welcome to Mr. Peter Stories. Today, I won't ask for likes, comments, or subscriptions because I've realized something important. Maybe I've been too focused on those things and lost sight of what truly matters. You. You're not just viewers to me. You're my family, my inspiration, and the reason I keep creating. I'm sorry if I've ever let you down with irrelevant requests or distracted from the stories we love to share. But no matter what, I want you to know how much you mean to me. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for allowing me to be a part of your life. Let's set all that aside and dive into another story together. This one's for you. The message arrived at 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday, transforming an ordinary autumn afternoon into the day Autumn Harper's world began to collapse. Standing in her Park Avenue penthouse kitchen, she read Dr. Matthews's words through a veil of tears. Her precious Luna, her brilliant 14-year-old daughter, had only months left to live. The rare form of leukemia had proven resistant to every treatment they'd tried. Experimental protocols, cutting-edge therapies, desperate prayers, none had stopped the cancer's relentless march through Luna's young body. The latest tests showed mutation, adaptation, defeat. Luna's laughter drifted down from her bedroom upstairs, where she was probably video chatting with her best friend Emma about the winter formal they'd been planning since September. The dance was still 3 months away. According to Dr. Matthews' message, Luna might not make it that long. Autumn's legs gave way, and she sank to the heated marble floor, her back pressed against the sub-zero refrigerator, still covered with Luna's artwork and straight-A report cards. Just that morning, Luna had been discussing dress shopping. "Mom, can we go this weekend? Emma found this amazing boutique in Soho. I want something in midnight blue, like the night sky, maybe with silver accents like stars." Stars. Luna had always been fascinated by astronomy, spending countless nights on their penthouse terrace with the telescope Julian had given her for her 10th birthday. "Stars are amazing, Mom," she'd say, her breath visible in the cold night air. "Even after they die, their light travels through space for years, touching lives long after they're gone." Autumn's phone buzzed again, Julian's name flashing on the screen. Her husband was probably calling from his law office downtown, expecting her to share the results of Luna's latest tests. He'd been too busy with a high-profile case to accompany them to the last few appointments, sending his regrets via his assistant, Willow. The same assistant who'd been giving him lingering looks during office parties, who'd been working late nights on cases that somehow required her presence until dawn. But Autumn couldn't think about that now, couldn't deal with the growing distance between them, the late-night whispered phone calls he thought she didn't hear, the lingering scent of unfamiliar perfume on his suits. Her world had narrowed to a singular focus, the precious months left with Luna, each moment now measured and weighted like gold dust in an hourglass. The sound of footsteps on the spiral staircase snapped her back to the present. Luna appeared in the kitchen doorway, her once thick dark hair now wispy beneath the vintage silk scarf she'd started wearing. Autumn's mother's Hermes, repurposed with the creative flair that made Luna uniquely herself. She decorated it with tiny hand-painted constellations, transforming the classic pattern into her own celestial map. "Mom, I'm starving. Can we order from that new Thai place?" Luna's eyes sparkled despite the dark circles beneath them. "Emma says their spring rolls are amazing." "Of course, sweetheart." Autumn forced a smile, quickly wiping away her tears. "Anything you want." "Should we get extra for Dad?" Luna asked, scrolling through the menu on her phone. "He might come home early tonight." The hope in her daughter's voice made Autumn's heart crack a little more. "Yes, let's get enough for everyone." She placed the order while Luna chatted about the winter formal, about Emma's new boyfriend, about the science project she was determined to finish, despite spending more time in hospital rooms than classrooms. Autumn memorized every detail of the moment. The way the late afternoon sun caught Luna's profile, the elegant gestures of her thin hands as she talked, the determination in her voice as she planned a future that was evaporating like morning dew. Later, she would have to tell Julian. Later, there would be tears and anger and bargaining with a universe that remained coldly indifferent to their prayers. But for now, she ordered spring rolls and watched her daughter talk about dresses she might never wear and dances she might never attend. The Thai food arrived just as the sun was setting. They set up dinner on the terrace, Luna insisting on using the fancy plates because everything tastes better on Wedgwood. As they ate, Autumn's phone buzzed repeatedly with Julian's calls, but she let them go to voicemail. This moment with Luna felt too precious to interrupt. "Mom," Luna asked as they finished eating, her voice suddenly serious. "Is everything okay? Did Dr. Matthews call about the test results?" Autumn reached across the table to take her daughter's hand, marveling at how Luna could be so perceptive even now, even here. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Let's just enjoy the sunset." But as they sat there under the darkening sky, Autumn heard the elevator ding in their private foyer. Julian was finally home. Strange sounds drifted from the direction of the master bedroom, voices, laughter, the unmistakable sound of intimacy. Luna's eyes widened slightly, her grip on Autumn's hand tightening. "Mom." "Stay here, sweetheart," Autumn said quietly, rising from the table. "Watch the stars come out. I'll be right back." As she walked toward the master bedroom, each step feeling like lead, Autumn remembered Luna's words about starlight traveling on long after the star itself was gone. She didn't know it yet, but this evening would mark the death of one chapter in their lives and the beginning of another. One where love and betrayal, forgiveness and regret would dance like binary stars around the gravity of a dying child's last wishes. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, spilling a wedge of warm light into the hallway. And there, in the bed where they'd created Luna, where they'd held each other through the worst nights of her diagnosis, Julian West was tangled in expensive sheets with his young assistant, his wedding ring glinting mockingly on the nightstand. Chapter 2. Shattered Trust Time, crystallized in the doorway of the master bedroom, each heartbeat stretching into eternity as Autumn Harper stood frozen, the takeout bag of Thai food slipping from her nerveless fingers. The sound of the paper bag hitting the Italian marble floor cut through the sounds of passion like a gunshot, causing Julian to freeze mid-motion above Willow Kane's writhing form. The pristine white Egyptian cotton sheets, 1,200 thread count, changed religiously every morning by Mrs. Chen, were twisted around their bodies like a grotesque sculpture. The sheets Autumn had selected from that boutique in Paris during their last family vacation, before Luna's diagnosis changed everything, before their daughter started painting constellations on headscarves to cover her hair loss, before this moment that would shatter what remained of their family's fragile peace. Julian turned, his face transforming from ecstasy to horror as he registered his wife standing in the doorway. Willow let out a small shriek, scrambling to cover herself with the sheets. The half-empty bottle of rare Burgundy on the nightstand, the wine they'd been saving for Luna's recovery celebration, bore silent witness to their betrayal. "Autumn," Julian breathed, her name falling from his lips like a prayer or a plea. He moved to stand, but tangled in the sheets, nearly fell. The mighty defense attorney, known for his grace under pressure, reduced to a clumsy naked man, caught in the act of destroying his family. "Don't." Autumn's voice emerged stranger than she'd expected, calm, almost conversational. "Please don't get up on my account, though you might want to keep it down. Our dying daughter is having dinner on the terrace." Willow's face, already flushed from their activities, turned an even deeper shade of red. She clutched the sheets higher, as though modesty mattered at this point. "Mrs. West, It's Harper," Autumn corrected automatically. "Autumn Harper. And you're Willow Kane, graduated magna cum laude from Columbia Law 3 years ago, hired directly into Julian's team. I remember your interview. You wore a navy suit and talked about your passion for justice. How ironic." The sound of footsteps in the hallway made Autumn's heart stop. "Mom." Luna's voice, weak but worried, carried through the door. "Is everything okay?" "I heard voices." Autumn moved faster than she knew she could, pulling the door shut behind her, just as Luna appeared at the end of the hallway. Her daughter stood there in her constellation-decorated silk pajamas, swaying slightly from the effort of walking, her dark eyes, so like Julian's, filled with concern. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," Autumn lied, amazed at how steady her voice remained. "Your father's just working. Did the noise disturb you? You should be resting." Luna's gaze drifted to the Thai food, scattered across the floor, then back to her mother's face. Understanding dawned in her eyes, understanding no 14-year-old should have to carry. "Is Dad with his assistant again? The one who wears the expensive perfume?" The question hit Autumn like a physical blow. Of course, Luna had noticed. She'd inherited her father's sharp mind, his attention to detail. How long had she lain awake at night, piecing together the signs of her family's disintegration while battling the cancer that was consuming her body? Behind the closed door, they could hear hurried movements, whispered arguments, the sounds of a life imploding. Luna stepped closer, her thin frame trembling with exhaustion. "Dr. Matthews called today, didn't he? About my test results?" Autumn gathered her daughter into her arms, feeling the bird-like fragility of her bones. "Let's get you back to bed, sweetheart. We can talk about everything tomorrow." "There might not be many tomorrows left, Mom." Luna's voice held a wisdom far beyond her years. "I heard you crying in the kitchen earlier. The new treatment isn't working, is it?" Before Autumn could answer, the bedroom door opened. Julian emerged, hastily dressed, his collar askew and his face ashen. Behind him, Willow slipped past like a ghost, clutching her designer purse to her chest as she fled toward the service elevator. "Luna!" Julian started, reaching for his daughter, but she stepped back, pressing closer to Autumn. "Don't," Luna whispered, the single word heavy with disappointment. "Just don't, Dad. I've been trying to call you all day. Where was your phone while you were busy with her, next to your wedding ring on the nightstand?" Julian flinched as if struck. "Princess, please, don't call me that." Luna's voice cracked. "Princesses have fathers who show up for chemotherapy, who hold their hands during spinal taps, who choose their dying daughters over their young assistants." The elevator dinged, signaling Willow's escape. The sound seemed to break something in Luna. She turned to her mother, her face crumpling. "Can we go back to the terrace? I want to look at the stars while they tell me how long I have left." Autumn nodded, supporting her daughter as they walked away from Julian, away from the evidence of his betrayal, away from the shattered remains of their family's trust. She could hear him calling after them, his voice growing desperate, but she didn't look back. On the terrace, the night had turned cool. Luna settled into her favorite chair, wrapped in the cashmere throw she'd had since childhood. Above them, the stars were beginning to appear, indifferent to the drama unfolding beneath their eternal light. "Stars teach us something important, Mom," Luna said softly, her eyes fixed on the heavens. "They show us that even things that look permanent can change, explode, become something entirely different." She paused, her breath catching slightly. "But their light travels on, touching lives long after they're gone." Autumn held her daughter close, feeling the subtle tremors that ran through Luna's failing body. Behind them, through the penthouse windows, They could see Julian standing in their ruined bedroom, his figure silhouetted against the light like a man facing judgment. "I'm not afraid of dying, Mom," Luna whispered. "I'm afraid of leaving you alone, of what this will do to both of you." She turned her face up to the sky where more stars were appearing by the minute. "Promise me something." "Anything, sweetheart. Promise me you won't let his betrayal be the end of the story. Promise me you'll find a way to make something beautiful out of all this brokenness. Like the stars do when they explode, like I did with this headscarf when my hair fell out." Below them, Manhattan glittered like a jewelry box full of broken promises. Above them, the stars continued their ancient dance, bearing witness to one family's unraveling and a dying girl's wisdom. And somewhere between heaven and earth, between love and betrayal, between life and death, Luna Harper West watched the night sky and planned her final gift to her father. 3 impossible tasks that would either redeem him or break him completely. Chapter 3. The Fall from Grace. Julian West's corner office at Harrison, West and Associates faced the Manhattan skyline he'd once commanded like a king. Now, 2 weeks after Autumn's discovery, he stood at those floor-to-ceiling windows, watching his empire crumble, each piece falling away like stars dying in slow motion. The Wall Street Journal lay open on his imported mahogany desk, his disgrace splashed across the business section. "Top attorney abandons dying daughter for young assistant." Below the headline, a particularly damning photograph showed him leaving the Four Seasons, Willow's blonde hair visible in the background. The article detailed not just the affair, but his absence from Luna's treatments, painting him as a monster who'd chosen career and conquest over his terminally ill child. His phone buzzed again, the 10th time in the past hour. Another message from Willow. He hadn't spoken to her since that devastating evening, but her texts had evolved from tearful apologies to thinly veiled threats about workplace harassment, as if she hadn't been the one to pursue him, to stay late every night, to wear those skirts that seemed to get shorter with each passing week. Marcus Harrison, the firm's founding partner and his mentor of 20 years, entered without knocking. His grave expression was one Julian had seen him use countless times before delivering a devastating cross-examination. "The ethics committee vote wasn't even close, Julian." Marcus settled into one of the leather chairs, his perfectly pressed suit a stark contrast to Julian's disheveled appearance. "Every major client has requested reassignment. The Morrison case, the Jensen merger, the Phillips defense, all gone. Nobody wants their case tainted by association." Julian ran a trembling hand through his unkempt hair. The crystal decanter on his desk, Autumn's gift when he made named partner, sat empty, much like his future. "I'll resign," he offered, reaching for what remained of his dignity. "Save the firm the embarrassment. That's already been decided." Marcus placed a thick envelope on the desk. "The morality clause you drafted yourself. Ironic, isn't it? The partnership vote was unanimous. You'll receive a fraction of your equity stake, but the majority will be retained by the firm to offset the damage to our reputation. 27 years of 60-hour weeks, sacrificed weekends, missed family dinners, all reduced to a number in a severance package. The same morality clause he'd wielded like a sword over other partners now fell on his own neck. His phone lit up with a message from Luna's oncologist, another treatment session he wouldn't be allowed to attend. Autumn's lawyers had made sure he couldn't come within 50 feet of the hospital without prior written permission. "How is she?" Marcus asked softly. He'd been Luna's godfather, had attended every birthday party until work took precedence over personal relationships. Catherine wanted to visit, but Autumn's lawyers advised against any contact from anyone associated with the firm. Julian's throat constricted. I don't know. They won't let me see her. The last update I got was from her nurse. Her blood counts are dropping again. She asked for me during her last treatment, but He couldn't finish the sentence. Jesus, Julian. Marcus stood, straightening his suit jacket with practiced precision. The affairs, the late nights, the cutting corners on pro bono cases. I looked the other way because you got results. But this... He gestured to the divorce papers on the desk, bearing the letterhead of Sloan and Barrett, one of the city's most ruthless family law firms. You had everything. A brilliant wife who understood our world, a daughter who worshipped the ground you walked on. Was it worth it? The question hung in the air like smoke, choking him with its implications. Worth it? The memory of Luna's face when she'd caught glimpses of him in the hospital corridor, the way her eyes had filled with tears when security had escorted him out at Autumn's request. The look of betrayal when she'd finally understood why he hadn't been there for her latest rounds of treatment. His phone buzzed yet again, this time an email from Willow's newly retained counsel outlining a sexual harassment claim she intended to file unless a suitable settlement could be reached. The young woman who'd whispered promises of understanding and escape in his ear now wielded their affair like a weapon, aimed straight at what remained of his reputation. At the bottom of his desk drawer, he found a handmade Father's Day card from Luna, decorated with careful drawings of DNA helixes and cells. "To the best dad in the world," she'd written. "Thank you for always fighting for justice." The card slipped from his trembling fingers, floating to the floor like autumn leaves. Another message lit up his phone, this one from Autumn. "Luna's numbers are worse. They're admitting her tonight. Don't try to come. She doesn't want to see you." As day turned to evening, Julian West, no longer a named partner, no longer a respected attorney, no longer welcome in his daughter's dying moments, stood in his emptying office. The security guard who had greeted him with respect every morning for decades now watched him with careful suspicion as he packed his personal items into boxes. His last act was to take down the photographs from his credenza, Luna's school pictures through the years, marking the progression of her growth like rings in a tree, the family vacation in Paris before the diagnosis, before everything changed, the father-daughter dance from last year's benefit gala where she'd worn a dress that matched his bow tie and beamed with pride as they'd waltzed across the ballroom. Would there be more photographs to add to the collection, or would these frozen moments be all he had left? Memories of a time before he'd destroyed everything that mattered. Outside, the city had turned cold, winter wind whipping between buildings like judgment made manifest. A few blocks away at Mount Sinai, his daughter was being admitted for what might be her final hospital stay. And he couldn't be there, wouldn't be allowed to be there. The taxi driver who took him to his hotel room at the Four Seasons glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Rough day, mister." Julian clutched Luna's Father's Day card, its edges worn soft with age. Through the window, he could see the hospital's lights glowing in the distance, each one a reminder of the battles his daughter was fighting without him. "No," he replied quietly, "just justice being served." Chapter 4. 3 Impossible Tasks. The pediatric oncology ward at Mount Sinai Hospital had become Autumn's second home over the past year, its mint-green walls and antiseptic smell as familiar as her own penthouse. Tonight, though, something felt different. The fluorescent lights seemed harsher, the beeping of monitors more insistent, as if the very building sensed the weight of what was to come. It was just past midnight when River Santiago appeared in the doorway of Luna's room. The night nurse had been with them since the beginning, her gentle competence and quiet wisdom helping them navigate the treacherous waters of childhood cancer. But tonight, her usually serene face bore an expression Autumn had never seen before, a mixture of determination and something that looked almost like hope. Luna was finally sleeping, her thin frame dwarfed by the hospital bed. The constellation-painted headscarf she wore had slipped slightly, revealing patches of scalp where her dark curls had once been. The room around her was a testament to her enduring spirit, walls covered with scientific diagrams and star charts, strings of fairy lights casting a soft glow, and a telescope positioned by the window, always ready for clear nights. "Mrs. Harper," River whispered, careful not to wake her patient. "Could we speak privately?" Autumn followed the nurse into the family consultation room down the hall, her heart racing. Had there been a change in Luna's condition? The latest test results weren't due until morning, but in her experience, middle-of-the-night conversations rarely brought good news. The consultation room was small but comfortable, designed to soften the blow of difficult conversations. River closed the door and took a seat across from Autumn, her dark eyes intense beneath her curly hair. Her ID badge caught the light. River Santiago, RN, Pediatric Oncology, Level 3. 13 years of experience written in simple text. But Autumn knew those years represented countless stories of triumph and tragedy, of lives saved and lives lost. "Luna spoke to me earlier," River began, her voice soft but clear. "After you stepped out to take that call from your lawyer, she was unusually lucid. Sometimes, near the end, patients have these moments of absolute clarity. We see it often, though we can't really explain it medically." Autumn's hands clenched in her lap. "Near the end? But Dr. Matthews said we might still have months." "Luna knows," River interrupted gently. "Children often know, even when we try to protect them. They feel it in their bodies, in their souls. And Luna, she's always been special. More aware than most." A memory flashed through Autumn's mind. Luna at age 4, solemnly explaining to her preschool teacher that stars die too, but their light travels on forever. Even then, she'd understood things that seemed beyond her years. "She has 3 wishes," River continued, pulling a worn notebook from her scrubs pocket. "Or rather 3 tasks, for Julian." The mention of her soon-to-be ex-husband's name sent a spike of pain through Autumn's chest. Julian lost the right to any part of Luna's life when he chose. "These aren't his rights," River corrected. "They're Luna's, and she was very specific about them. She asked me to write them down, to make them official." She opened the notebook, revealing Luna's own handwriting at the top of the page, spidery and weak, but still recognizable. She called them Daddy's Path to Redemption. Autumn's throat tightened. Of course, Luna would frame it that way. Even now, even after everything, she was looking for ways to save her father from himself, just like she'd done with her endless science projects, always trying to solve the world's problems one experiment at a time. River began to read from the notebook. "First task. Daddy must give away his entire fortune to children's cancer research. Not just some of it, all of it. Every penny he earned choosing work over family has to go to helping other kids like me." The words hit Autumn like physical blows. Julian's wealth had been his armor, his measure of success, the thing he'd prioritized over family dinners and dance recitals. Luna had noticed. Of course she had noticed. "Second task," River continued. "He must stand up in court. Not just any court, but Judge Sterling's court, where he won his biggest cases, and tell the complete truth. About the affair, about missing my treatments, about all of it. No lawyer tricks, no clever words, just the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth." Judge Aurora Sterling had been Julian's mentor, the woman who'd helped shape his career. To confess his failures before her would be a special kind of punishment, one that struck at the heart of his professional pride. "And the third task," Autumn asked, though part of her already knew, could feel it in the way River's fingers tightened on the notebook. 30 days in the pediatric cancer ward, not as a visitor, not as a donor, but as a volunteer, cleaning bedpans, reading stories, holding hands during procedures, doing all the things he should have done for me, but for other kids instead. River's voice cracked slightly. She said, and I'm quoting directly here, "Maybe if he sees enough children fighting for their lives, He'll remember what really matters." Autumn stood abruptly, moving to the window. The city sprawled out below, a maze of lights and shadows. Somewhere out there, Julian was probably in his luxury hotel suite, or maybe in Willow's apartment, trying to rebuild his shattered life. While here, in this hospital room, their daughter was crafting a path to his redemption with her remaining strength. How can she still believe in him? The question escaped before Autumn could stop it. After everything he's done? River's reflection appeared beside her in the window glass. "Because she's dying, Mrs. Harper, and when you're dying, you see things differently. Time becomes precious in a way that healthy people can't understand. Every moment matters. Every chance for healing becomes vital, not just for yourself, but for the people you'll leave behind." The nurse placed the notebook on the windowsill between them. "Luna knows she won't be here to see if he completes these tasks. She knows she won't get to dance with him at her wedding, or show him her college acceptance letters, or make him a grandfather. These tasks are her last gift to him, a chance to become the man she always believed he could be." "And if he refuses?" Autumn asked, though she already knew the answer would break her heart. "Then that's his choice." But Luna was very clear about one thing. These tasks have to be his choice. No lawyers, no court orders, no pressure from anyone. He has to choose to do them, just like he chose everything else. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Another nurse, young, probably new to the ward, poked her head in. "Miss Santiago, Luna West is asking for you. She's awake and her pain levels are increasing." River nodded, already moving toward the door with professional efficiency. But she paused, turning back to Autumn. "Luna said one more thing. She said, 'Tell Mommy not to be angry if Daddy fails. Some people can only learn their lessons after it's too late.'" Autumn watched the nurse disappear down the hallway, her shoes squeaking softly on the polished floor. The notebook lay where River had left it, Luna's careful handwriting a testament to her fading strength. Each letter had clearly been an effort, but she'd wanted to write it herself. One last experiment in human nature, one final attempt to prove that love could transform even the hardest heart. Moving back to Luna's room, Autumn found her daughter awake, her dark eyes bright with fever or determination or both. River was adjusting her pain medication, the morphine drip clicking softly in the quiet room. "Mom?" Luna's voice was weak but clear. "Did River tell you about the tasks?" Autumn sat carefully on the edge of the bed, taking her daughter's thin hand in hers. "Yes, baby, she told me." "Do you think he'll do them?" The hope in Luna's voice was almost unbearable. Autumn thought of Julian, of his pride, his ambition, his carefully constructed image of success. Could a man like that humble himself enough to complete these tasks? Could the attorney who'd never lost a case accept losing everything that had once defined him? "I don't know, sweetheart," she answered honestly. "But I know he loves you." Luna's fingers tightened slightly around hers. "That's why I made the tasks hard. Love isn't real unless it costs you something. That's what you always taught me." Autumn blinked back tears, remembering all the times she'd said those words, usually about small sacrifices, like giving up weekend plans to help at charity events or spending vacation money on books for underfunded schools. She hadn't imagined her 14-year-old daughter would apply the lesson so profoundly. "The tasks are impossible," Luna continued, her voice growing drowsy as the pain medication took effect. "But so is dying at 14. So is losing your hair and your future, and your chance to see the stars from every continent like we planned. Impossible things happen every day, Mom. Maybe this one will be a good, impossible thing." As Luna drifted back to sleep, Autumn remained by her side, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Outside the window, the first hints of dawn were painting the sky in shades of hope and warning. Somewhere in the city, a copy of Luna's tasks was making its way to Julian's hotel, carried by River's trusted colleague who worked the early shift. 3 impossible tasks, written in a dying girl's shaking hand. A chance at redemption, offered by a heart too pure to give up on love, even when love had failed her. And in the quiet of the pediatric oncology ward, as machines beeped and nurses made their rounds, Autumn found herself doing something she hadn't done since finding Julian with Willow. She prayed. Not for Luna's healing, that prayer had been exhausted over months of treatments and trials. Not for her own strength, she'd learned to find that in herself. No. She prayed for Julian, prayed that somewhere beneath the expensive suits and carefully crafted arguments, beneath the ambition and the weakness that had led him astray, there was still enough of the man she'd fallen in love with to recognize this gift for what it was. Not just a chance to make amends, but a final lesson from the daughter who'd always seen the best in him. 3 impossible tasks: a father's redemption, a daughter's last hope, and the quiet tick of a hospital clock, counting down the precious moments until dawn. Chapter 5. The Other Woman. The first time Willow Kane saw Luna West in person, she was hiding behind a potted plant at Mount Sinai Hospital, lipstick stains from Julian's kisses still fresh on her collar. She'd come to deliver urgent documents that could have waited until morning, but urgency had become their code for stolen moments. Instead, she witnessed Luna's first major seizure. Now, standing in her Upper East Side apartment, Willow stared at her reflection in the designer mirror Julian had bought her. The woman looking back wore a perfect theory blazer and Louboutin heels, but her mascara was smeared from crying. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from her mother in Connecticut. "I didn't raise you to be the other woman." Delete. From her sister, "Did you really not know his daughter was dying?" Delete. The Wall Street Journal lay open on her marble countertop, their scandal splashed across the business section for the 3rd time this week. Her own name appeared in paragraph 4. Willow Kane, 27, a junior associate at the firm, has retained counsel and is reportedly preparing a sexual harassment suit. The words made her stomach turn. They weren't wrong. She had retained counsel. But they couldn't capture the complexity of that night at the hospital, when she'd watched from behind expensive foliage as Luna convulsed in her mother's arms. Julian's phone had buzzed repeatedly in their hotel room, but she'd convinced him to ignore it. "They'll call if it's really important," she'd whispered, unbuttoning his shirt. "You deserve one night of peace." Peace. The irony of that word hit her now as she opened her laptop to find another email from Sterling, Hayes and Partners offering her a position several steps down from where she'd been. The managing partner's message was carefully worded. "We believe in second chances, Ms. Kane, but we also believe in clear boundaries and ethical conduct." Her memories betrayed her, flashing back to Luna's science fair presentation 3 months ago. Willow had attended as Julian's assistant, standing in the back, while Luna explained cellular mutation to the judges. "Sometimes cells forget their purpose," Luna had said, her eyes bright with passion despite the dark circles beneath them. "They start hurting the body they're supposed to help." Willow picked up her phone, scrolling through old messages from Julian. The latest had come at 3 a.m. "They won't let me see her, Willow. She's asking for me, and they won't let me see her." She'd left it unanswered, like all his messages since that devastating night when Autumn discovered them. The coffee maker beeped, a $600 Breville that Julian had sent to her office one day, just because she'd mentioned liking the one in the partner's lounge. She'd kept it, along with the other gifts, the Cartier watch, the Hermès scarf, the first edition law books. Each one had felt like a token of their connection. Now they felt like blood money. A new text lit up her phone, from River, Luna's nurse. The message was simple but devastating. "She knows it was you who kept him away that night, the night of her seizure. She said to tell you she forgives you, but she hopes the weight of it stays with you forever." Willow's legs gave out. She sank to her imported tile floor, remembering another night at the hospital. She'd gone to deliver more urgent documents, only to find Luna alone in her room, crying through a particularly brutal round of chemotherapy. Julian was supposed to be there, had promised to be there, but Willow had convinced him to attend her friend's gallery opening instead. "Network with the art crowd," she'd said. "They're all potential clients." Now Luna's words from the science fair haunted her. Cancer cells are interesting because they're not foreign invaders. They're our own cells that have forgotten their purpose, forgotten how to live in harmony with the body they're part of. They consume resources meant for healthy growth, multiply unchecked, destroy the very system they once helped build. Willow moved to her bedroom window, staring at the lights of Mount Sinai in the distance. Her legal career lay in shambles, her reputation destroyed, her ambitious dreams turned to ash. But none of that compared to the weight of knowing she'd helped steal precious time from a dying girl. Her doorman buzzed. Her Uber to the law offices where she'd signed the settlement papers was waiting. She grabbed her Prada briefcase, another gift from Julian, and took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back looked expensive but hollow, like a designer dress on a mannequin. In her building's lobby, she passed a young girl about Luna's age, wearing a headscarf decorated with butterflies. The girl's mother supported her as they walked, their love palpable in every careful step. Willow rushed past them into her Uber, but not before hearing the girl ask, "Mom, will Daddy make it to my treatment today?" The car passed Mount Sinai, and Willow found herself remembering the last time she'd seen Luna. It was at the firm's charity gala, just weeks before the affair was discovered. Luna had been radiant despite her illness, wearing a midnight blue dress decorated with silver stars. She'd been explaining constellations to anyone who would listen, her enthusiasm undimmed by the cancer eating away at her body. Julian had barely spoken to his daughter that night, too busy introducing Willow to potential clients as his brilliant protégé. But Willow had seen Luna watching them, her dark eyes missing nothing. Had she known even then? Had she seen the cancer in their family's heart, the mutation of affection into betrayal? The law offices of Chen and Associates occupied a modest floor in a midtown building. Her lawyer met her in the lobby, his expression grave. "The settlement papers are ready. Full NDA. Statement absolving the firm of responsibility. You'll be taken care of financially." Taken care of. Like Luna should have been. Like Julian should have been there to do. As she signed her name on line after line, Willow remembered Luna's words about cellular mutation. The fascinating thing is that these cells don't set out to destroy. They just forget what they're supposed to be, what purpose they're meant to serve. They lose their way, and in losing their way, they destroy everything around them. The settlement check would clear next week. 6 figures of guilt money, enough to pay off her student loans and maybe start fresh somewhere else. The sterling Hayes offer still waited in her inbox, a lifeline to respectability if she could swallow her pride and accept the demotion. But as she left the conference room, her heels clicking on polished floors that no longer belonged to her world, Willow Kane understood that no amount of money could settle her true debt. Somewhere in that hospital across town, a 14-year-old girl was fighting for every breath, her father banned from her bedside because of choices Willow had helped him make. Her phone buzzed one final time. Julian again. "I need you, Willow. Everything's falling apart." She deleted the message, then dropped her phone in a trash can. Let him fall apart. Let him face the consequences of their choices. She had her own mutation to live with, the way she'd forgotten her purpose, forgotten basic humanity in pursuit of ambition and desire. That night, as she packed away Julian's gifts for donation, Willow finally understood Luna's scientific metaphor completely. She had been the cancer in the West family, not a foreign invader, but something that should have been healthy, should have served a purpose, should have known better than to multiply unchecked and consume resources meant for a dying child's precious time with her father. The coffee maker was the last thing she unplugged. $600 for a machine that had really been meant to buy her complicity, her silence, her willingness to believe that ambition justified stealing a dying girl's father. As she studied her reflection one last time, Willow saw what Luna must have seen. Not the other woman, not the ambitious young lawyer, not even the villain of the piece. Just another cell that had forgotten its purpose, another cautionary tale about the high cost of losing your way. Tomorrow, she would accept the Sterling Hayes offer. She would pack up her designer clothes and her law school awards and her carefully constructed image of success. She would start over, smaller this time, humbler. And maybe, if she was very lucky, she would learn to live with the knowledge that Luna's forgiveness was a greater burden than her hatred could ever have been. Chapter 6. The Courtroom. 2B of the New York County Supreme Court held 27 years of Julian West's triumphs. His voice had filled this space countless times, weaving arguments like spells, bending truth to his will. Now, standing in the witness box where he'd eviscerated countless opponents, he felt stripped bare beneath the weight of actual truth. Judge Aurora Sterling studied him from the bench, her silver hair catching the morning light that streamed through the high windows. She'd been more than his mentor. She'd been at Luna's christening, had taught him the difference between winning cases and serving justice. Now her dark eyes held something between disappointment and anticipation, as though she were witnessing both an execution and a rebirth. The gallery behind him was packed. Fellow attorneys who'd once sought his advice now leaned forward like vultures, their phones silenced but ready to spread his disgrace across legal circles. A sketch artist from the New York Times captured his unraveling in swift, brutal strokes. But it was the small figure in the back row that gutted him. Katie Morrison, age 12, daughter of his biggest client, wearing a headscarf identical to Luna's. She'd come to watch her father's lawyer admit how little children with cancer actually meant to him. "Mr. West," Judge Sterling began, her voice carrying the weight of their shared history, "you've requested this unusual addition to today's divorce proceedings. Normally, such matters are handled with discretion, particularly given your standing in the legal community. Are you certain you wish to proceed?" Julian's hands gripped the wooden rail of the witness box. This morning, he'd stood before his hotel mirror, practicing his statement like any other court appearance. But Luna's diary entry from last night had changed everything. "I wonder if Daddy remembers teaching me about binary stars, how they orbit each other, keeping each other in balance. But some stars drift away, forget their dance, forget what holds them together. That's what happened to you, Daddy. You drifted away from our family's orbit." "Yes, Your Honor," he answered, his voice rougher than she'd ever heard it. "As part of my daughter's conditions, I must tell the complete truth in this courtroom before you." Autumn sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing the midnight blue suit she'd worn to their wedding. Their wedding bands had matched the color, custom-made platinum rings now separated like their lives. Her attorney, Catherine Sloane, watched him with the focused intensity of a hawk preparing to feast on particularly promising prey. "I, Julian Christopher West, stand before this court to confess my failures, not just as a husband, but as a father, a man, and a member of the legal profession I once held sacred." The formal language felt foreign on his tongue. He'd always used words as weapons or shields. Using them for pure truth was like speaking a language he'd forgotten he knew. "My affair with Willow Kane began 13 months ago during the Morrison case preparation." His eyes found Katie Morrison in the gallery. Her father had hired him to save their company while her friend Luna fought cancer alone. The timing is important because it coincided with my daughter Luna's first round of aggressive chemotherapy. He could see Autumn's shoulders stiffen at the mention of dates. She'd been going through old calendars, he knew, trying to piece together exactly when their marriage had begun to crumble. On September 15th of last year, Luna had a particularly difficult treatment session. She was throwing up blood, crying for me. His voice cracked. I told Autumn I couldn't leave the office, claimed we had a crucial filing deadline. The truth is, I was in the Peninsula Hotel with Willow, charging champagne to the firm's account, and convincing myself I deserved a break from the stress of having a sick child. The gallery's murmur grew louder. Judge Sterling tapped her gavel once, restoring order. Her face remained impassive, but Julian could see the slight tightening around her eyes. She'd held Luna as a baby, had watched her grow. The affair continued through Luna's second and third rounds of treatment. I missed 17 hospital appointments, 12 specialist consultations, and 3 emergency room visits. Each time I had an excuse: court appearances, client meetings, case preparations. The truth is, I was simply choosing my own pleasure over my daughter's need for her father. In the gallery, he saw Marcus Harrison, his former mentor, cover his face with his hands. The firm's reputation would take years to recover from this public confession. But it was Katie Morrison's silent tears that twisted the knife deeper. When Luna was first diagnosed, Julian continued, pulling her diary from his pocket, she asked me to explain her illness in legal terms. Make it make sense, Daddy, she said, like you do for the jury. So I told her about good cells and bad cells, about how her body's legal system was fighting against invaders. I promised her that just like I never lost a case, she wouldn't lose this fight. His hands shook as he opened the diary to a marked page. But while she fought her battle, I betrayed every principle I claimed to stand for. Let me read from her diary, Your Honor. She wrote this during a chemotherapy session I missed for a crucial client meeting that was actually a weekend at the Four Seasons with my assistant. Mom holds my hair, what's left of it, while I throw up. The nurses are kind, but they're not Daddy. No one tells stories about constellations the way he used to. Back when I was his universe instead of an appointment, he couldn't fit into his schedule. I pretend he's saving someone else's world, fighting some important battle in court. But I heard his assistant Willow on the phone earlier, confirming their dinner reservation. I guess some battles matter more than others. A sob broke the courtroom's silence, not from Autumn or the gallery, but from the court reporter herself. Judge Sterling made no move to restore order. I used the firm's resources to facilitate my affair: corporate cards, client apartments, even billing hours spent with Willow to case numbers. I abused my position of authority over a junior associate, violated ethical guidelines I helped write, and destroyed the trust of not just my family, but the entire legal community that had welcomed me as one of their own. Each confession felt like bloodletting, years of carefully hidden truths finally seeing daylight. He detailed every missed hospital visit, every lie told, every moment stolen from his dying daughter to feed his own selfish desires. The night Autumn discovered the affair, Luna had just received news that her latest treatment had failed. She was asking for me, wanting to know if I'd finally make it to her next hospital session. Instead, she heard her mother find me in bed with a woman young enough to be her sister. He had to stop, his composure cracking. Through blurred vision, he saw Katie Morrison stand and walk out, her mother following close behind. Their exit felt like an indictment. Luna created these 3 tasks as a path to redemption. Not just for me, but for her. She needs to believe that her father can still be the man she thought I was, even if she won't be here to see it. The first task was giving away my fortune to children's cancer research. The second is this confession here, in front of the court, where I built my reputation on half-truths and clever arguments. He turned to face Autumn directly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. What I did to our family, to our daughter's precious remaining time, there's no legal argument that can justify it, no precedent that can excuse it. I stand here only because Luna asked me to, because truth spoken in this courtroom was once sacred to me, before I desecrated everything I claimed to hold dear. From his pocket, he withdrew a small box. Inside lay their matching wedding bands and Luna's first baby tooth, treasures from a time when he'd known what mattered. The third task, he continued, his voice barely steady, is 30 days in the pediatric cancer ward. Not as a donor or visitor, but as a volunteer. Cleaning bedpans, changing sheets, holding the hands of children fighting the battle I should have helped my own daughter face. Luna said maybe if I saw enough children fighting for their lives, I'd remember what really matters. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Even Catherine Sloane had stopped writing notes, her pen frozen over her legal pad. I've spent my career arguing before this court that truth is subjective, that justice is what we make it through skillful argument and careful presentation of facts. Today, I stand before you with only one truth. I failed the people who needed me most. I traded my daughter's trust for temporary pleasure, my wife's love for cheap excitement, and my professional integrity for the illusion of renewed youth. He opened Luna's diary one last time, to the entry she'd written just yesterday. The stars teach us something important about justice, Daddy. They show us that even after they're gone, their light travels on, touching lives they'll never know. I hope that when I'm gone, my light will help you remember how to love purely again. How to be the father I know you can be, even if it's for other children who need you. Maybe that's why all this happened, so you could learn what really matters before it's too late for someone else's daughter. Judge Sterling's voice was gentle when she finally spoke. The court acknowledges your confession, Mr. West. While much of what you've disclosed falls outside the scope of these divorce proceedings, I believe I speak for everyone present when I say that truth, however painful, however late, has value. She turned to Autumn. Mrs. Harper, do you wish to respond to your husband's statement? Autumn stood slowly, her dignity a palpable force in the courtroom. Only this, Your Honor. Luna believes in redemption. Even now, even after everything, she's a better person than any of us deserve. She paused, then added quietly, I hope her faith isn't wasted. As Julian left the witness box on shaking legs, he caught his reflection in the courtroom's ornate mirrors. The man looking back was a stranger, humbled, broken, stripped of all pretense. But somewhere in that stranger's eyes, he thought he saw something new, the first glimmer of truth, shining like a distant star in the darkness he'd created. Tomorrow, he would begin his service in the pediatric ward, learning what Luna had tried to teach him all along, that love shows itself not in grand gestures or legal victories, but in the simple act of being present for the moments that matter most. For now, though, he walked out of courtroom 2B for what would likely be the last time, carrying with him the weight of truth finally spoken, and the lighter burden of pretense finally abandoned. Behind him he heard Judge Sterling's voice, soft but clear. Court is adjourned, but justice is just beginning. Chapter 7. Empty Wealth. The little girl couldn't have been more than 6. She sat in Thomas Chen's waiting room at First Manhattan Bank, her pink backpack covered in unicorn stickers, while her mother spoke quietly with the receptionist about accessing their last savings account. Julian watched as she colored in a dog-eared picture book, her head wrapped in a Wonder Woman scarf that couldn't quite hide the telltale signs of chemotherapy. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Julian, Thomas said, removing his designer glasses to pinch the bridge of his nose. You want to liquidate everything, not just some assets, not just a portion of your investment portfolio, but everything. Through the glass walls of the office, Julian could see the little girl showing her mother her drawing. The woman's smile was brave, but her eyes held the same desperate calculation he'd seen in Autumn's eyes during Luna's early treatments. The mental math of survival, weighing mortgage payments against medication costs. "Everything," Julian confirmed, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. He pulled Luna's diary from his briefcase. He carried it everywhere now, like a condemning Bible. The penthouse, the Hamptons estate, the villa in Tuscany, all stock holdings, all investment accounts, everything except the bare minimum I need to rent a modest apartment and live simply while I complete Luna's other tasks. Thomas leaned back in his chair, the morning sun catching the silver in his hair. He'd managed Julian's wealth since the early days, had helped turn a successful attorney's salary into a fortune through careful investments and strategic planning. That's over $40 million, Julian, a lifetime of wealth accumulation, your entire safety net. Julian opened Luna's diary to a page he'd read so many times the paper was starting to wear thin. Today, they told the mother down the hall, they've exhausted their insurance coverage. Her little boy only has one treatment option left, but they can't afford it. I heard her crying in the bathroom later. Dad spent more on his new car last month than their entire fundraising goal. I don't understand how money works in this world, but I know it's wrong. Did you know, Julian said, spreading out papers he'd gathered during sleepless nights in his hotel room, that pediatric cancer research receives less than 4% of federal cancer research funding? That families go bankrupt trying to buy their children a few more months of life? He pulled out statistics, stories, desperate GoFundMe pages. While I was buying that Tuscany villa, parents were selling their homes to pay for their children's chemotherapy. The little girl in the waiting room had fallen asleep on her mother's lap, her Wonder Woman scarf slightly askew. Julian saw Luna in her. Luna at that age, before cancer, before he'd chosen career and desire over being her father. How many fathers were missing their daughters' treatments right now, not because of affairs or ambition, but because they had to work multiple jobs to afford the medications? "Very well," Thomas said finally, turning to his computer. "We'll need to start with the liquid assets. The properties will take time to sell, but I can begin the process today. Where would you like the funds directed?" Julian handed him another document, a carefully researched list of pediatric cancer research foundations and hospitals. As Thomas began the process, Julian's phone lit up with notifications. Each transaction alert felt like a step towards something he couldn't quite name. Not redemption exactly, maybe understanding. The first foundation director called within hours, her voice trembling with emotion. "Mr. West, this will fund our research program for the next 5 years. We can finally move forward with the clinical trial we've been planning." By afternoon, news of his donations had spread through the pediatric cancer research community. Each call brought another story. A treatment protocol that could now be developed, a research team that could be fully staffed, a family assistance program that could be expanded. Standing at Thomas's window, Julian watched the mother and daughter leave the bank. The little girl was awake now, clutching her mother's hand as they walked to the subway. He thought of Luna's words from her diary. "Money is like stardust, Daddy. It only matters when it's part of something bigger than itself." His phone buzzed. River, Luna's nurse. "Your daughter wants you to know something," her message read. She said, "Tell Daddy that empty pockets can hold more love than full ones. Tell him I'm proud he's learning what wealth really means." As sunset painted Manhattan in shades of gold, Julian signed the final transfer documents. His penthouse would be listed tomorrow, the Hamptons estate already had interested buyers, and the Tuscany villa's caretaker was preparing it for sale. Each property represented years of accumulated status and pride, now being converted into hope for children he would never meet. The studio apartment he'd rented in a modest neighborhood awaited him, a far cry from his penthouse, but more honest somehow. No marble countertops or imported furniture, just a bed, a desk, and a window facing east. Everything else would be sold, its value transferred to research funding, its absence a reminder of what really mattered. That night, as he sat at his simple desk, reading Luna's diary, an email arrived from Mount Sinai Hospital. The volunteer coordinator had approved his application to serve in the pediatric oncology ward. His 30 days of service would begin tomorrow. No designer suits, no corner office, just blue scrubs and the chance to be present for children fighting the battle he should have helped Luna face. Julian closed Luna's diary, his fingers tracing her words about stardust and transformation. Through his window, he could see Mount Sinai's lights glowing in the distance. Tomorrow he would walk those halls not as a wealthy donor or a powerful attorney, but as a humble volunteer, learning the true cost of the time he'd wasted chasing things that didn't matter. A final message lit up his phone. Autumn, sharing Luna's latest test results. The numbers were worse, but Luna had asked the nurses to move her bed near the window. She wants to count stars, Autumn wrote. Says she's making sure the universe has enough light for all the children who need miracles. Julian looked at his empty walls, his single suitcase, his new life stripped of everything except purpose. Tomorrow he would learn what wealth really meant, not in dollars or properties or status symbols, but in moments spent holding tiny hands through painful procedures, in stories read to children too sick to sleep, in the simple act of being present for battles bigger than any he'd ever fought in court. His fortune was gone, transformed into possibility for other families, other children, other futures. But as he prepared for his first day of service, Julian West understood that true wealth had nothing to do with bank accounts or real estate portfolios. It lived in the space between heartbeats, in the courage of children fighting impossible odds, in the chance to make right what he'd gotten so terribly wrong. Luna had known this all along. Now it was his turn to learn that empty pockets could indeed hold more love than full ones, and that sometimes the greatest fortune of all was the opportunity to be present for moments that money could never buy. Chapter 8. The Cancer Ward. The pediatric oncology ward at Mount Sinai Hospital looked different at 5 a.m. Julian stood in the staff locker room, his designer suit replaced by standard-issue blue scrubs that felt like sackcloth against his skin. His hands, once steady in the most intense courtroom battles, trembled as he pinned on the volunteer badge, Julian West, Pediatric Oncology Support. Through the locker room window, he could see Luna's room 3 floors up, fairy lights twinkling like distant stars. He wasn't allowed up there, the restraining order made sure of that, but knowing she was under the same roof made his heart ache with a pain no legal victory had ever matched. Nurse River Santiago appeared beside him, her eyes reflecting both judgment and possibility. "Your first patient is in room 204, she said, handing him a clipboard. "Marcus Thompson, age 7, terminal diagnosis like Luna. He's been asking for his father, but... Julian's throat tightened. His father couldn't handle it. Walked out 2 months ago, said he couldn't watch his son die. River's voice held no accusation, but Julian felt the weight of her words like a physical blow. Marcus has been pretending his dad is just away on business, like Luna used to do with you during her early treatments. The boy's room was dim, except for a Star Wars nightlight casting lightsaber shadows on the wall. Marcus lay curled around a worn dinosaur plush, his once dark skin ashen, his head bare from chemotherapy. When he opened his eyes, Julian saw Luna's same fierce determination to live. "Are you a doctor?" Marcus whispered. "No, I'm just here to help." Julian moved closer, noting how the boy's fingers clutched the dinosaur tighter. "I like your friend there. Rex keeps me safe when I'm scared," Marcus confided. "Dad gave him to me before." His voice trailed off, then brightened artificially. "But he'll be back soon. He's just really busy with important meetings." The words hit Julian like shrapnel. How many times had Luna made similar excuses for him? How many times had she pretended his absences were about work rather than betrayal? "I had an accident," Marcus admitted suddenly, shame coloring his cheeks. "The medicine makes it hard to control sometimes." Julian moved without hesitation, helping River change the soiled sheets. His manicured hands, more accustomed to signing legal documents than providing basic care, learned new skills: how to lift a fragile body without causing pain, how to clean with dignity, how to offer comfort through touch rather than words. "You're good at this," Marcus murmured as Julian tucked him back in. "Better than my dad. He always got squeamish about medical stuff." "I'm learning," Julian replied softly. "Someone very wise is teaching me what matters." The morning progressed in a series of lessons, each more profound than any he'd learned in law school. 9-year-old Sarah in room 207, her leukemia in temporary remission, asked him to read The Little Prince for the 4th time. "Luna always says it's better when you do different voices for the characters," she told him. Julian's heart stopped. He hadn't known Luna visited other patients during her better days. In room 212, 12-year-old David hurled his breakfast tray at Julian, screaming about the unfairness of it all. Instead of calling security as he once would have, Julian sat with the boy through his rage, understanding finally how Luna must have felt watching him throw away their precious time together. 4-year-old Emily in room 215 couldn't speak through her pain, but she held Julian's hand with surprising strength during her spinal tap. Her mother watched from the corner, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered to Julian. "Her father. He tries, but he can't handle seeing her like this. At least you're here." During his lunch break, Julian caught a glimpse of Autumn leaving Luna's room. Their eyes met across the hallway. Her gaze held no anger now, just a profound sadness that mirrored his own. Through the closing elevator doors, he saw Luna's constellation-painted headscarf, a flash of color in the sterile hospital environment. "She's asking for you," River said quietly, appearing beside him. "But you know the rules. 30 days of service before any contact. Those were her conditions." Julian pressed his forehead against the cool window of the break room. "How is she?" "Fighting. Like they all do. Like they shouldn't have to." The afternoon brought new challenges that stripped away more layers of his former self. He helped a teenager through her first walk after surgery, her determination reminding him so much of Luna that he had to step away briefly to compose himself. He held a basin for a young boy suffering through chemotherapy side effects, remembering how many times Autumn had done this alone for their daughter. Then came the moment that shattered what remained of his carefully constructed walls. A code blue in room 415. Little Emily, her tiny body finally giving up the fight. Julian watched the medical team work frantically, his own helplessness a living thing in his throat. When the doctor called time of death, the girl's mother collapsed against him, her screams muffled against his scrubs. He held her, this stranger united with him, in the terrible fellowship of parents with dying children. Her grief cracked something open inside him, the last barrier between who he had been and who Luna needed him to become. That evening, as he changed back into his street clothes, Julian found a drawing slipped into his locker. Marcus had sketched him in crayon, wearing his blue scrubs, a cape flowing behind him. "My hero," the childish writing proclaimed, "until Dad comes back." In the hospital chapel, Julian knelt for the first time since law school. "I understand now," he whispered, to whatever might be listening. The cases I thought were so important, the money I chased, the affair that destroyed everything. It was all meaningless compared to holding a dying child's hand, compared to being present for the moments that really matter. A young father hurried past him into the hospital, carrying a small girl wrapped in a princess blanket. The man's face held the same terror Julian remembered from Luna's first admission, the desperate belief that money or influence or sheer force of will could somehow stop the unstoppable. But Julian knew better now. 29 more days of service stretched ahead of him, each one an opportunity to learn what Luna had known all along, that presence mattered more than presence, that love showed itself in the mundane moments of care, that true strength wasn't found in legal victories, but in sitting with suffering and refusing to look away. His phone held dozens of missed calls, colleagues amazed by his financial sacrifice, reporters seeking comments, Willow making one last attempt at contact. None of it seemed to matter anymore. Instead, he opened Luna's diary to a dog-eared page. Sometimes I think Daddy's forgotten that the most important cases don't happen in courtrooms. They happen in hospital rooms, in the space between breaths, in the moments when someone chooses to stay instead of running away. Tomorrow, he would return for another shift. Tomorrow, there would be more beds to change, more hands to hold, more stories to read to children who understood mortality better than any child should. Tomorrow, he would continue learning what his daughter had known all along, that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or legal victories, but in the courage to be present for life's hardest moments. As he left the hospital, he looked up at Luna's window. The fairy lights twinkled like earthbound stars, and somewhere behind them, his daughter slept beneath her own constellation of hopes and fears. Julian touched the volunteer badge still pinned to his chest, feeling the weight of his transformation in every step toward his modest apartment. The night nurse passing by nodded in recognition. Rough first day. Julian thought of Marcus clutching his dinosaur, of Sarah and her little prince, of Emily's final moments. He thought of Luna, just floors above him, believing still in his capacity for change. No, he replied softly. Just learning what I should have known all along. Above him, the stars emerged one by one, witnesses to the slow redemption of a father who had finally learned that the most important job in the world was simply being there, holding space, choosing to stay when every instinct screamed to run from the pain of watching children suffer. And somewhere in that cosmic dance of light and shadow, Julian West felt something that felt dangerously like hope. Chapter 9. Luna's Diary. The break room of the pediatric oncology ward was empty when River found Julian there, his scrub still bearing the traces of a difficult morning, helping a young patient through a particularly violent round of chemotherapy side effects. 3 weeks into his volunteer service, his hands had grown accustomed to the work, but his heart still broke freshly each day. "You look like you could use this," River said, placing a cup of the hospital's mediocre coffee in front of him. But it wasn't the coffee that caught his attention. It was the worn notebook she held in her other hand, its purple cover decorated with hand-drawn constellations and shooting stars. Julian recognized it immediately. He'd seen Luna writing in it countless times during her treatments, though she'd always closed it quickly when he entered the room during his increasingly rare visits. His throat tightened at the sight. "She asked me to give this to you," River explained, settling into the chair across from him. "After you completed the first 2 tasks, she said you'd need it for strength to finish the third." The notebook felt impossibly heavy in his hands. The cover was worn soft at the corners, bearing coffee stains and what looked like teardrops on its pages. Luna's name was written on the front in her distinctive handwriting, each letter decorated with tiny stars. Luna West's Observatory of Life. "I shouldn't," he whispered, his fingers trembling against the cover. These are her private thoughts. I've invaded enough of her privacy, broken enough of her trust. She wants you to read it, River interrupted gently. She said, and I'm quoting here, "Daddy needs to see what he missed while he was busy saving everyone else's world except ours." With shaking hands, Julian opened the diary. The first entry was dated 2 years ago, before the diagnosis, before everything fell apart. "Dear diary, today Dad missed my science fair again. Mom said it was because he had an important case, something about saving a company from bankruptcy. I won first place for my project on stellar nucleosynthesis, how stars create elements through nuclear fusion. I wanted to tell him how the judge said I could have a future in astrophysics. Mom took pictures, but it's not the same. I wonder if his client's children get to see him more than I do." The next entry was from 6 months later. "The doctors say it's leukemia. Mom cried when they told us, but Dad was on his phone in the hallway, talking about court deadlines. I wanted to tell him I was scared, but he looked so busy. He always looks busy now. I drew a picture of our family as a solar system. Mom and Dad are binary stars, and I'm their planet, but lately it feels like Dad's star is drifting away, pulling out of orbit." Julian had to stop reading for a moment, his vision blurring. He remembered that day clearly. The Morrison case had been heating up, and he'd been juggling calls with expert witnesses. He'd told himself Luna wouldn't remember his distraction, that providing for her future was more important than being present for her fear. The entries continued, marking the progression of both her illness and his gradual withdrawal. "Had chemo today. The nurses are nice, especially River. She holds my hand during the hard parts and tells me stories about constellations. Dad was supposed to come, but his assistant called to say he had an emergency motion to file. Mom pretends it doesn't hurt her when he cancels, but I see her crying sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep. Lost my hair today. Mom helped me paint constellations on her old Hermes scarf to wear as a head cover. She said we'd make beauty out of change. I wish Dad had been here to help paint the stars. He used to know all the constellations. He taught them to me when I was little, before law became his favorite subject. Daddy's always working late now. His assistant, Willow, brings him changes of clothes at the office. Mom gets quiet whenever she calls. I learned about cellular mutation in my research, how one small change can spread through an entire system, destroying what was healthy. I wonder if families can mutate too." The entries grew shakier as her condition worsened, but her insights became sharper, more profound. "The doctors say the first treatment failed. Mom held me all night. Dad came by for 20 minutes between court appearances. He looked expensive and important in his suit, but somehow smaller too, like he was fading away even as he stood there. I wanted to ask him if he remembers teaching me about black holes, how they're so focused on consuming everything around them that they miss the beauty they're destroying." Then came the entry from the night Autumn discovered his affair. "I heard Mom crying tonight. Really crying, not the quiet tears she thinks I don't notice." Then there were voices, angry ones. I caught a glimpse of Dad's assistant leaving through the service elevator. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my last round of medications. I understand stellar death now, how stars can implode, destroying everything in their radius. I think that's what's happening to our family. The next pages contained drawings, surprisingly sophisticated sketches of their family in happier times. Julian, at her 5th birthday, helping her build a model solar system. Family vacations when she was younger, before work became his excuse for everything. Each drawing was annotated with memories, questions, hopes that grew increasingly desperate. Remember when Dad used to read me bedtime stories about brave scientists who changed the world? Now he only tells stories to judges and juries. I miss the way his voice changed for different characters. Mom says everyone deserves a second chance. She says it's like my treatment protocols. Sometimes you have to try different approaches to heal what's broken. That's why I'm making these tasks for Dad. Maybe if he remembers how to care about something bigger than himself, he'll remember how to be the father I used to know. The most recent entry was dated just days ago. The new treatment isn't working. I can feel it in my body, like stars going dark one by one. But I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of leaving Mom alone, of Dad never understanding what he lost while chasing things that don't matter. River says sometimes people need to lose everything to find what they should have valued all along. I hope my tasks help Dad find his way back, even if I'm not here to see it. I designed the tasks like a scientific experiment. First, remove the variable of wealth that he used to justify his absence. Second, force him to confront the truth he's been hiding from. Third, make him witness the battle he should have helped me fight. Maybe then he'll understand that success isn't measured in billable hours or legal victories, but in the moments you choose to be present for the people who need you. I love you, Daddy, even when you forgot how to love us back, even when work became your favorite child. Even now, when the cancer is winning and you're still missing the important moments. I love you enough to believe you can change, enough to give you these tasks as my last gift, a chance to remember who you were before you lost your way. The final page held a simple drawing, their family as constellations in a night sky, connected by lines of love that formed familiar patterns. Beneath it, Luna had written, "Everything in the universe is connected. Every choice creates ripples that affect other stars, other lives. Dad chose his career over his family, success over presence, ambition over love. But choices can be unmade, orbits can be corrected, hearts can remember how to beat in sync with the ones they're supposed to love. I'm giving him these tasks because I believe the father who taught me about stars is still in there, behind the expensive suits and legal arguments. And maybe, when he reads this, he'll understand that no case was more important than our family, no victory worth the cost of missing his daughter's life." Julian closed the diary with trembling hands, aware that his face was wet with tears. River sat quietly across from him, her presence a steady anchor in the storm of emotions Luna's words had unleashed. "She sees everything," he managed finally. "All this time, while I was congratulating myself on providing her with material comfort, she was watching me drift away, documenting my failures with the same scientific precision she brought to her beloved astronomy." "Children always see more than we think," River replied softly. "They're like the telescopes Luna loves so much, focused on details we adults miss in our rush to accomplish what we think matters." Julian ran his fingers over the constellation-covered notebook, feeling the slight indentations where Luna had pressed her pen harder during emotional moments. Each page was a testimony to what he'd sacrificed for success, each entry a star map leading back to what he should have valued all along. "Keep it with you," River advised, standing to return to her rounds. "Read it when the work gets hard, when you're tempted to think you're doing enough by just being here. Let her words guide you, like the stars she loves so much." After River left, Julian remained in the break room, Luna's diary open before him like a sacred text. Outside, the hospital continued its endless rhythm of life, death, and the battles in between. Somewhere above him, his daughter was fighting her own battle, believing still in his capacity for change. He had 9 days left of his 30-day service. 9 days to prove that Luna's faith wasn't misplaced, that the father she remembered, the one who had taught her about stars and held her through nightmares and placed her wonder above his own ambition, still existed beneath the layers of professional success and personal failure. The diary would stay with him, its pages a constant reminder of what he'd lost while chasing things that didn't matter. And maybe, if he was very lucky, its words would help him find his way back to the man his daughter had never stopped believing he could be. Chapter 10. The Last Dance. The winter formal's theme had been A Night Among the Stars. Luna had helped design the decorations months ago, back when hope was still a currency they could trade in, when the possibility of her attendance wasn't measured in heartbeats and borrowed time. Now, as Julian stood in the doorway of her hospital room on his final day of service, those same decorations transformed the sterile space into a makeshift ballroom. Fairy lights twinkled across the ceiling, arranged in the constellations Luna loved so much. Her telescope stood sentinel by the window, its lens catching the late afternoon light. The midnight blue dress she'd chosen for the formal hung on the back of the door like a beautiful ghost of future moments they'd never share. Autumn was there, helping Luna sit up in bed, adjusting the constellation-painted headscarf with gentle hands. Their daughter's face was gaunt now, her skin almost translucent, but her dark eyes still held that familiar spark of determination. The past 30 days had changed her, changed all of them. While Julian cleaned bedpans and held the hands of dying children, Luna had continued her own battle, growing weaker as the cancer claimed more territory in her failing body. "You came," Luna whispered, her voice thin but clear. The medical equipment surrounding her bed beeped steadily, marking time like a cosmic metronome. "I finished the tasks," Julian replied softly, still standing in the doorway, uncertain of his welcome, despite completing Luna's challenges. "All 3 of them." River appeared behind him, carrying Luna's favorite lavender-scented lotion. "Your father has been quite the revelation in the ward," she told Luna, her voice carefully neutral. Even Dr. Matthews commented on his dedication. Luna's smile was like starlight breaking through clouds. "I knew you could do it, Daddy. Even when you didn't believe in yourself anymore, I believed in you." Julian moved into the room, noting how Autumn tensed slightly but didn't object. His expensive suits were gone now, replaced by modest clothes that matched his simplified life. The designer watch he'd once used to track billable hours had given way to the simple digital one he'd worn during his hospital service. But the biggest changes weren't visible. They lived in his heart, in the way he saw the world now, in the priorities that had shifted like tectonic plates beneath his feet. "The winter formal is tonight," Luna said, her fingers playing with the edge of her blanket. "Emma sent me pictures of her dress. She's going with Tyler Matthews. Remember how nervous he was when he asked her?" Julian's throat tightened. He did remember. Luna had talked about it during one of his brief visits, but he'd been distracted by a case, his responses automatic and hollow. How many moments had he missed while chasing things that seemed meaningless now? "Dance with me, Daddy," Luna said suddenly, her voice stronger than it had been in days. "One last time like we used to." Autumn made a small sound, protest or pain, he couldn't tell. But Luna was already trying to move, her determination temporarily masking her weakness. "Sweetheart, the tubes," Julian began. But River was already there, professionally adjusting lines and monitors. "We can make it work," the nurse said, her efficient hands creating a small space of possibility. 5 minutes, no more. Her oxygen levels need to be monitored. Julian looked at Autumn, seeking permission or forgiveness or both. She nodded once, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'll hold her lines," she offered quietly, "so they don't tangle." With infinite care, Julian helped Luna stand. She weighed almost nothing now, her body burned down to essential elements like a star in its final phases. Her hospital gown was backed by the midnight blue dress she'd never wear, creating a tableau of what was and what should have been. "I made a playlist," Luna whispered against his chest, "for the formal. Mom helped me. Can you play it, River?" Soft music filled the room. Somewhere Over the Rainbow performed as a gentle instrumental. Luna's choice, Julian realized, remembering how they'd watched The Wizard of Oz together when she was small, before legal briefs replaced bedtime stories. They began to sway gently, more an embrace with movement than true dancing. Luna's feet rested on top of his, just like when she was little, and he'd dance her around the penthouse living room. Back then, her laughter had filled their home like music. Now, each breath was a victory, each moment a gift they couldn't take for granted. "Do you remember," Luna murmured, "when you taught me about binary stars? How they orbit each other, keeping each other in balance?" "You said it was like marriage," Julian recalled, his voice rough. "Two stars dancing through space together." "But some stars drift away," Luna continued, her scientific mind still sharp despite her failing body. "They forget their dance, forget what holds them together. That's what happened to you, Daddy. You drifted away from our family's orbit." Julian held her closer, careful of the tubes and monitors that mapped her deterioration. "I'm so sorry, Luna. I forgot what mattered, forgot that no legal victory could ever be as important as dancing with you." "But you remembered," she whispered, "through the tasks, through helping other children fight their battles, through telling the truth in court, through giving away the things that used to matter more than family." The song changed. Another instrumental, this time Moon River. Luna's breathing was becoming labored, but she showed no sign of wanting to stop. Autumn moved with them, managing the medical lines like puppet strings, her own tears falling silently. "I won't make it to graduation," Luna said suddenly, her voice matter of fact. "Won't get to dance at my wedding or show you my college acceptance letters. This is our last dance, Daddy." "Luna, please," Julian began, but she continued, her words carrying the weight of things that needed to be said. "It's okay. I'm not afraid. The stars don't die, really. Their light travels on forever, touching lives long after they're gone. Like my tasks for you. Like the money you gave to help other sick children. Like the truth you told in court. Like the comfort you gave to kids in the cancer ward. Those things will keep traveling, keep making a difference." Julian could feel her tiring, her slight body growing heavier in his arms. But still they danced, marking time to music that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the hospital room, beyond the pain and regret and love that filled the space between them. "Promise me something," Luna whispered, her voice growing fainter. "Promise you'll remember what you learned. That success isn't measured in cases won or money earned, but in moments shared and love given. Promise you'll keep helping other families fight their battles, even when I'm not here to remind you what matters." "I promise," Julian managed, each word a covenant written in tears and sealed with the memory of this dance. "Everything I am now, everything I'll be is because of you, Luna, because you believed I could change when I'd forgotten how." The song was ending. River stepped forward, medical training overriding sentiment. Her oxygen levels are dropping. She needs to rest now. With infinite gentleness, Julian helped Luna back to bed. Autumn adjusted her oxygen tube and smoothed her headscarf, her hands lingering on their daughter's face. The room seemed different now, holier somehow, as if their dance had transformed the space into something sacred. "I love you, Daddy," Luna murmured as sleep began to claim her. "Thank you for remembering how to dance with me." Julian sat beside her bed, holding her hand as she drifted off. The fairy lights above them created patterns like distant galaxies, and somewhere in the hospital, other fathers were learning the lessons he'd learned too late. That time is precious, that love is shown through presence, that no achievement matters more than the simple act of dancing with your child. Autumn touched his shoulder lightly, the first voluntary contact since discovering his affair. "She needed this," she said softly. "We all did." Outside the window the sun was setting, painting the sky in colors Luna had once tried to capture in her artwork. The winter formal would be starting soon, filled with teenagers dancing beneath artificial stars, unaware of how precious each moment was. But here in this room, Julian West held his daughter's hand and watched her sleep, grateful for one last dance beneath the real stars she loved so much. The music had stopped, but somewhere in his heart they were still dancing, father and daughter moving to rhythms older than time, saying goodbye in the language of love and starlight and borrowed time made precious by its brevity. Chapter 11. Forgiveness. Sunday dawned with the kind of quiet that feels like held breath. The early morning light filtered through Luna's hospital room window, casting gentle shadows across the constellation maps that covered her walls. The steady beeping of monitors had slowed overnight, each sound more distant than the last, like stars going dark one by one. Autumn sat on one side of Luna's bed, Julian on the other, their first time sharing space peacefully since the affair. Their daughter lay between them, her breathing shallow but steady, her skin nearly translucent in the growing light. The constellation-painted headscarf had slipped slightly, revealing the delicate curve of her skull, but neither parent moved to adjust it. Every touch now felt like goodbye. "The sunrise is beautiful," Luna whispered, her voice barely audible above the medical equipment, like nebulas painting the sky. Julian glanced at the window, where dawn was indeed creating spectacular swirls of pink and gold. Even now, even here, Luna saw beauty in the universe. Her telescope stood ready by the window, though she hadn't had the strength to use it for weeks. "Tell me about the stars, Daddy," she requested, her fingers light as butterfly wings against his palm, "like you used to, before you got too busy for bedtime stories." The words held no accusation, only love, and perhaps a touch of wistful remembrance. Julian's throat tightened as he searched his memory for the astronomical knowledge he'd once shared so freely with his stargazing daughter. "The stars we see," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "are actually showing us the past. Their light takes so long to reach us that by the time we see them, we're looking at history written in starlight." "Like memories," Luna murmured, her dark eyes finding Autumn's. "Mom, remember when we went to the planetarium for my 10th birthday? Before the diagnosis, before everything changed? We had hot chocolate, and you let me stay up past midnight to watch the meteor shower." Autumn's hand trembled as she smoothed Luna's headscarf. "You mapped every meteor's path, trying to predict where they'd appear next. Your father was supposed to join us, but he had the Peterson case," Luna finished. "It's okay. He's here now. That's what matters." The monitors beeped a gentle warning. River, who had stayed past her shift because she knew, they all knew, slipped into the room to check Luna's vitals. Her movements were professional but tender as she adjusted medications and checked readings. "The pain?" she asked softly. Luna's smile was ethereal. "The stars don't feel pain when they transform into something new. They just change, become something different, something more." Autumn's sob caught in her throat. Even now their brilliant girl was teaching them, showing them how to face the inevitable with grace and wisdom beyond her years. "I need you both to promise me something," Luna said, her voice growing fainter. She reached for both their hands, bringing them together over her heart. The gesture was deliberate, meaningful, their first physical contact since the discovery of Julian's betrayal. "Anything," Julian whispered, feeling Autumn's fingers tremble against his. "Promise me you won't let my passing become another wall between you." Luna's words came slowly now, each one carefully chosen. "Promise me you'll remember what I told you about binary stars, how they can drift apart, but sometimes find their way back to a new dance." "Luna," Autumn began, but their daughter pressed on. "Mom, you taught me that love is stronger than mistakes. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it means choosing to see the light even after darkness. Her fingers tightened slightly around their joined hands. And Dad, you learned through your tasks that redemption is possible, that it's never too late to remember what matters. The morning light strengthened, catching the prism hanging in Luna's window and sending rainbow patterns dancing across the room. She had insisted on hanging it there months ago, saying she wanted to catch pieces of starlight even during the day. I'm not asking you to forget, Luna continued, each word now a visible effort. I'm not asking you to go back to how things were. I'm just asking you to remember that love, real love, is bigger than betrayal, bigger than anger, bigger than loss. River moved quietly around the room, adjusting Luna's pain medication as the monitors showed increasing distress. But Luna's mind remained clear, her purpose unwavering. The tasks weren't just for Dad, she revealed, her voice growing softer. They were for all of us, to show that change is possible, that hearts can heal, that even when everything seems broken, there's still light if you know where to look for it. Autumn's tears fell freely now, landing on their joined hands like baptismal water. Julian's own vision blurred as he watched their daughter, their miracle, their teacher, their guiding star, prepare for her final transformation. I love you both, Luna whispered, together and separately, for who you were, who you are, and who you'll become after I'm gone. Promise me you'll find a way to honor that love, even if you can't find your way back to each other. The monitor's beeping grew more insistent. River moved closer, her professional calm masking her own grief. This death, like all deaths in the pediatric ward, would leave its mark on everyone present. We promise, Autumn managed, her voice breaking. Oh, my brave girl, we promise. The stars, Luna murmured, her eyes growing distant. They're so beautiful from up here, like diamonds scattered across velvet. Did you know that when stars die, they release all their elements back into the universe? Everything they were becomes part of everything that will be. Julian leaned closer, memorizing every detail of his daughter's face. Tell us more about the stars, sweetheart. Luna's smile was radiant despite her fading strength. They're dancing, Daddy, all of them, like we danced yesterday, like binary stars finding their rhythm again, like hearts learning to beat in new patterns. Her voice trailed off as her breathing changed. The monitors registered the shift immediately, their warnings more urgent now. River moved to the bed, her hands gentle but ready. Mom? Dad? Luna's voice was barely a whisper now. Thank you for teaching me about love. Different kinds of love. Imperfect love. Love that survives even when everything else falls apart. Her fingers pressed their hands together one last time. A final act of healing, of hope, of belief in the power of forgiveness to transcend even the deepest wounds. Look for me in the starlight, she breathed, in the spaces between heartbeats, in the moments when forgiveness feels impossible but happens anyway. The morning sun broke fully through the window then, filling the room with golden light that turned Luna's headscarf into a celestial map. For a moment, she seemed to glow from within, as though her body had finally become one with the stars she loved so much. Love, she whispered, the word both completion and beginning, ending and promise. Love is stronger than mistakes. And then, as gently as starlight fading into dawn, Luna West left them. The monitors marked her passing with a single sustained tone, but in the room there was only peace, and the weight of a love so pure it had transformed three broken people into something new, something more. Autumn and Julian sat in silence, their hands still joined over their daughter's heart. Neither moved to break the connection. Outside, the city was waking up, unaware that a bright soul had just become stardust. Inside, two people who had loved and lost and failed and learned sat vigil for their miracle child, their hands bridging a gap that had seemed uncrossable just weeks ago. River moved quietly, professionally, turning off monitors and beginning the necessary procedures. but she paused at the door, looking back at the tableau before her. A family broken and reformed by love, held together in this moment by the pure light of a child's unwavering faith in the power of forgiveness. The sun continued to rise, sending rainbow patterns dancing across Luna's peaceful face. And somewhere, in the vast universe she had loved so well, a new star began to shine. Chapter 12. The Weight of Regret. 5 years had passed since Luna became Stardust, but for Julian West, time was measured differently now, not in billable hours or court victories, but in the moments he'd missed and the ones he'd never have. Tonight, like every night, he sat in his modest office at the Children's Cancer Hope Foundation, surrounded by Luna's artwork and the echoes of what could have been. The foundation's walls told stories of both loss and hope. Luna's scientific diagrams hung beside thank-you letters from families they'd helped, her constellation maps sharing space with photos of children who'd survived thanks to research funded by his former fortune. Her telescope, the one he'd given her for her 10th birthday, stood by his window, pointed eternally toward stars she'd never see. On his desk, worn soft with daily handling, lay her diary. He opened it each evening before leaving, a ritual of remembrance and reminder. Tonight, he turned to an entry he'd read hundreds of times, the pages tear-stained and fragile. "Daddy missed another treatment today. Mom says he's saving another company, fighting another important case. I wonder if he knows that while he's saving everyone else's world, ours is falling apart. The nurses are nice, but they're not him. No one tells stories about constellations the way he used to, back when I was his universe, instead of an appointment he couldn't fit into his schedule." The words still cut like glass, sharper now with the wisdom of hindsight. He turned to another page, this one containing a drawing of their family as celestial bodies, him drifting away from their family's gravitational pull, lost in the cold vacuum of ambition and desire. A knock at his door interrupted his reflection. A young mother stood there, holding a small boy with no hair and eyes too old for his face. Julian recognized them from the pediatric ward at Mount Sinai, where he still volunteered every week. "Mr. West," the mother's voice trembled. "They said we might find you here. Tommy's treatment isn't covered by insurance, and we've already sold everything." Julian stood, moving around his desk with the quiet grace he'd learned in the cancer ward. "Come in, please. Tell me about Tommy." As the mother spoke, tears flowing freely, Julian's eyes drifted to the wall behind them. A new artwork hung there, Luna's final drawing, completed just days before she left them. It showed a night sky full of stars, with one particularly bright one seeming to shine down on a father and daughter dancing. He'd framed it beside her last diary entry. "I wish Daddy knew that no case was more important than our family. But maybe, when I'm gone, he'll help other families hold on to what he forgot to cherish. Maybe my light will help him find his way back to what matters." The foundation he'd built in Luna's name had helped hundreds of families like Tommy's, providing not just financial support, but the emotional guidance he'd learned too late was invaluable. Every week, he spoke at schools about the price of misplaced priorities, his designer suits replaced by modest clothes that matched his simplified life. After arranging for Tommy's treatment coverage, Julian walked the mother and child out. The boy's smile reminded him so much of Luna that his heart clenched painfully in his chest. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in colors his daughter had once tried to capture in her artwork. His phone buzzed, a text from Autumn. She'd remarried 3 years ago to David Chen, a kind pediatric surgeon who understood the weight of their shared history. Her foundation for single mothers with sick children worked closely with Julian's organization, their shared purpose a bridge across the chasm of their past. "Luna's bench dedication is tomorrow," the message read. "River will be there. She said Luna visited her in a dream last night, talking about binary stars finding new orbits." Julian's vision blurred as he typed his response. The bench would be placed in the hospital's rooftop garden, where Luna had spent countless hours stargazing between treatments. Her telescope, a replica of her beloved one, would be permanently mounted beside it, allowing other sick children to explore the universe she'd loved so deeply. Back in his office, he began his nightly ritual. He'd kept every promise made to Luna, turning his legal expertise to advocating for families battling insurance companies and hospital bureaucracies. The man who once commanded courtrooms now spoke softly to terrified parents, holding their hands through the same battles he should have fought alongside Autumn for Luna. Opening her diary one last time, he read the entry that haunted him most, the one she'd written the night before everything fell apart with Willow. "The stars teach us something important, Daddy. They show us that even after they're gone, their light travels on, touching lives they'll never know. I hope that when I'm gone, my light will help you remember how to love purely again. How to be the father I know you can be, even if it's for other children who need you. Maybe that's why all this happened, so you could learn what really matters before it's too late for someone else's daughter." His tears fell freely now, dotting the pages that held his daughter's wisdom. Outside his window, the first stars were becoming visible in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Luna's light was still traveling, touching lives through the foundation that bore her name, through the families they helped, through the father she'd believed in, even when he'd forgotten how to believe in himself. On his desk, a photo caught the last rays of sunlight. Luna at her final science fair, proud despite her illness, explaining stellar nucleosynthesis to impressed judges. She'd won first place that day, but he'd been too busy with the Morrison case to attend. The trophy still sat on his shelf, a bittersweet reminder of priorities he'd gotten tragically wrong. The night deepened, and one by one, the offices around him went dark. But Julian remained, surrounded by the artifacts of a life cut too short and the evidence of its lasting impact. Tomorrow, he would stand beside Autumn at the bench dedication, their shared grief a testimony to Luna's belief that love transcends even the deepest betrayals. Then he would return to the pediatric ward, where children fought battles his daughter had lost, and he would give them what he'd failed to give her: presence, support, unwavering love. His final task each night was to record a message in Luna's old astronomy journal, a tradition he'd started after her passing. Tonight, he wrote, "My dearest Luna, today I helped another family fight the battle we lost. When the mother cried, I held her hand and told her about a brave girl who taught me that love is stronger than mistakes, who showed me that it's never too late to remember what matters. I miss you with every breath. Miss the sound of your laughter, the depth of your wisdom, the purity of your love. Miss the father I could have been, should have been, while you were here. But I promise you, my starlight, my teacher, my heart, your light lives on. In every child we help, every family we support, every moment I choose presence over ambition. You once said that stars don't die, they just transform. You transformed me, Luna. Through your tasks, through your forgiveness, through your unwavering belief in the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. I'm not the man who chose work over your treatments, status over your needs, desire over duty. That man died the day you became stardust. Look down on us tomorrow, my brave girl. Watch as we dedicate your bench under the stars you loved so well. See how your light still guides us, still teaches us, still transforms us. And know that somewhere in the vastness of space and time, a father and daughter are still dancing beneath painted constellations, her forgiveness teaching him that love is the only success that matters." As he closed the journal, a shooting star streaked across the night sky, a final wink from a universe that had taken his daughter but left him with her wisdom, her light, her undying belief in the power of love to change even the hardest heart. Julian West, no longer a legal titan, no longer a wealthy man, No longer the father who missed his daughter's life stood at his window and watched the star's path until it faded. Then, like every night, he whispered the words that had become his prayer, his purpose, his perpetual reminder. No case was more important than our family. I understand that now, Luna. I understand that now. Subscribe if you liked.